Mortgage Talk with Mark, where, as always, I'm excited to introduce a good friend of mine to talk about his specialty, which is not about mortgages. But we're going to learn a lot about how mortgages may fit in situations with Greg's business. His name is Greg Morrison, and Greg and I met. He's with Morrison Law Firm. We met several years ago as board members with the Westlake Chamber. And I've always appreciated what Greg's about, who he is, his ethics, and it's just intelligence. So I wanted to, I've been after him about 6 months to be on the show. So I finally wrangled him down to come in today, and we're going to talk about his specialty, which happens to be family law. So Greg, introduce yourself, say hi, and glad you're here.
Thank you for inviting me. I think you were being persistent to get me.
I see him all the time.
I know.
I said, hey, man, what are you going to do by my little show? So here we are.
I've had a bunch of people ask me, and I always go, yeah, we'll talk about that again later. Yeah. So Mark's the most persistent one who's asked me. But my name is Greg Morrison. Like you mentioned, I own the Morrison Law Firm. We're located in Westlake at the intersection of Cuernavaca and Bee Cave. And I've been practicing law for a long, long time now.
Yeah, particularly around family law.
We've been practicing law 35 years, almost 19 of those exclusively family law.
Good. Well, we're going to talk about kind of a touchy subject today, which a lot of people experience, including myself, which is divorce. You know, I got divorced in 2005. It was a painful experience. I got remarried. I'm never going to do that again. Believe me. So let's talk about divorce in Texas, particularly, because that's where we are.
Absolutely.
And let's talk about the difference between, you know, maybe what they call a fault divorce or no fault. Is that the right language to use?
It's language that gets thrown around. I'm not sure that everybody understands exactly
I don't know
what that means. So in Texas, you can get a divorce without anybody being at fault. That's what no fault really means.
Okay.
So if you just decide one morning that this isn't
You're
what
not
I
happy.
want to do anymore, you get a divorce.
Yeah.
If somebody gets beaten up, they get a divorce. It doesn't matter what happened that led to that point. And it doesn't matter whether there was or wasn't fault, the person is entitled to a divorce.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean that as the court divides property, they can't look at whose fault it was in breaking up and dividing the property. And so the court is tasked under the family code with making a just and right distribution of the assets. And those terms aren't defined. But generally what the court looks at is what are the equities of the situation? And so they'll look at fault. Did one person go outside the marriage, outside the relationship, and break their vows?
Okay.
And so that may be the person that gets less than half.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, absolutely has an impact. The other part that they look at is kind of the equality situation. So if one person has $10 million in separate property assets that aren't being divided, and you've got a $2 million asset, how perverse would it be for one person to get $1 million of that, and the other person leaves the marriage with 11 million?
Right, to one.
So the court might give more to the person who doesn't have that $10 million in separate property. Or if you've got somebody with a big disparity in wage earning capacity, especially if you've had a stay-at-home mom who's given up her career to help her
married to
spouse.
a doctor or something.
Absolutely. And so now that has to be kind of looked at as a possible grounds for a disproportionate share to that spouse.
I didn't know that. Has that always been the case, or is that unique to Texas, or all states pretty much like that?
I don't know much about the other states. Texas has been that way at least as long as I've been practicing law.
Been a while. Yeah. And let's talk about some misconceptions people have about divorce, maybe in Texas. Any ideas around that?
Oh, not more than one or two that I've ever encountered.
Misconception may be the fault, no fault.
Well, that's one of them by itself. I tell you that what I hear more than anything else, and I usually tell this story around Halloween of every year. Some of the biggest horror stories I hear is about somebody getting beaten up so badly and they walked out of the divorce with not one single nickel to their name, and they never get to see their children. I don't believe one single one of those stories. Courts here are very conscientious. They want kids to see both of their parents, unless there's something really extraordinarily going on. And they don't leave anybody penniless at the end of the divorce. Might a person leave and feel like they've gotten the short end of a stick? Absolutely. That then becomes the reality they share with all their friends as they try to play up that
defend
martyr
themselves.
syndrome.
That martyr syndrome.
And so I really find that our judges bend over backwards to be equitable in the way that they divide the property and the way that they take care of the children.
Good. You know, just a minute ago when you talked about that no fault thing, I just always assumed it was 50-50, but obviously that's not the case.
Not at all. I mean, I think that that's kind of where the judges start. But when you say that to a judge, they'll say, that's not where we start. We start with whatever's just and right in this case. And so I do think that when we try to settle cases, because anytime you're trying to settle a divorce, and a smart person will always do that,
Sure.
rather than letting a stranger decide your fate, you decide it for yourself.
Yeah.
When you're trying to decide that, you kind of start with the presumption that a court might be 50-50, and then you argue about why a court might deviate from that as you go through settlement. And obviously, a pragmatist, as I like to represent, if you're going to fight over a 1% difference and you're going to spend twice as much in attorney's fees, it's not exactly the smartest thing in the world. And so I try to be very pragmatic with my clients to help them just get the best solution today.
Yeah.
To go ahead and move on down the road and not spend a bunch of money on attorneys.
Yeah, because I've had friends, with fairly large estates, not huge, but who may spend 2 or 3 years of that stuff, and it takes forever and money, and it's like, oh, so painful.
Yes.
But Texas being a community property state, let's talk about that. I know a little bit about that on my end as a mortgage broker when it comes to real estate, just a little bit, but I don't know what that really means in your world.
Sure. That was kind of new to me when I went to law school. Texas recognizes 2 types of property: community property and separate property.
Okay.
And anytime a divorce is being addressed by a Texas court, they presume that all the property is community property. That's always the presumption.
Okay.
If anybody claims it's separate, they then have to prove by clear and convincing evidence that it's not community property.
Okay.
If they prevail on that, then that property under the Texas Constitution gets set aside and can't be divided. That person can't be divested of their interest in that separate property.
Okay.
Then the court looks at what's left with the community property, the net value of that estate after you look at all the debts, the secured and unsecured debts. And then once they figure that out, they figure out what's the just and right division for this particular couple, and then which assets and debts need to go where to reach that general outcome.
Okay.
And so it's real important in a divorce, if you've got things that you think are separate property, to make sure that you're documenting those.
Okay. Now let's take an example where a couple's married and one of them inherits a bunch of money. Is that considered separate property if they're already married?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know if it was commingle or how that would work.
Well, now commingling is a whole different issue I'd love to talk about, but let me start first with just the character of the assets. And so there, again, everything so presumptively the day you get married, the day you put a ring on the finger.
Right here.
Right. Or common law marriage, which I think we're going to talk about.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
Even whatever day you're first married, whether you put a real ring on it, whether you go to a church, whether you go to a justice of the peace, or whether you just look at
Vegas,
or whether you just look at each other and say, we're married now. Whatever that is, once you make that commitment, everything that's acquired from that day forward is presumptively community property. So there are 6 things that are generally recognized as separate property.
Okay.
1 are things that you bring with you into the marriage. You had it before you ever got married.
Okay.
Second thing is something
like an asset, like
a retirement account. Let's say you had a 401k or an IRA. It had $100,000 in it. You already had that.
It's already yours.
That wasn't a product of the community, so that's going to be your separate property. Second thing is if you bought something during the marriage, which presumptively would be community, but you bought it in whole or in part with a separate property asset, then it'll take that same percentage of ownership of separate property. For example, if the future wife had $1 million sitting in a bank account before she got married. Soon after they got married, they bought a $2 million house. And she said, I'll put down $500,000 of my separate money as a down payment. You and I'll take out a note, sweetie, for the other $1.5 million. That house is now 25% her separate property, probably, and 75% community property.
Okay.
So
is that by law, or is that to be set up by an attorney separately?
No, it's by law.
It's by law.
It is the effect.
If she can show that she wrote that big check.
Yes, and that's usually easier because, as you know, for mortgage, that closing file is going to document.
We're going to document every
of
penny.
Those down payments.
That's right.
Absolutely.
Okay.
The settlement sheet, the HUD's what we used to call the HUD, I think, is pretty good by itself. But then now they document everything, and you get that file. You're going to be able to see where those funds came through, whether it was a wire transfer, check, whatever it was.
Exactly.
The third thing that's separate property are gifts. Whether you receive them before the marriage or after the marriage, a gift is your separate property.
A gift or inheritance? Did you already talk about?
I'm going to get to that one. Okay. Fourth one is an inheritance.
Got it.
Again, regardless of when you inherited it, it's separate property. Fifth thing is if you have you have a bodily injury claim. For example, if you're injured in a car accident, it's your body.
Yeah.
So the recovery for that is going to be your separate
That's
property,
interesting.
unless it's lost wages. That portion of the recovery, because the wages would have been community property, the lost wages are community property.
Wow.
And then the last thing is if you have either a prenuptial or postnuptial agreement that defines something as separate property, and that's an enforceable agreement, then that will govern whether something's separate or community. But you mentioned commingling, and I love to talk about that.
Yeah, let's do, because I think that's pretty common.
Number one mistake that people make,
Yeah.
especially in a second marriage,
yeah,
or if they marry later in life. If you will, think about Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
If I've got red Kool-Aid and I've got a picture of yellow Kool-Aid, it doesn't take much mixing of the two to create orange Kool-Aid.
Yeah, there you go.
Right?
There you go.
And imagine then that you had to undo the orange back into red and yellow.
Good luck.
Could it be done? Absolutely. Would it be expensive and a lot of effort? Absolutely. Same thing happens in marriages. We take separate property, if you'll call that red Kool-Aid, and then you get married. So the minute you get married, I don't care if you've been working 5 years for that employer, your paycheck transitions on the date of marriage from a separate property asset to a community property asset. So if I take my
listen, everybody, listen up, everybody.
I know, you take your paycheck, yellow,
right,
and you put it into the bank account that's got the red Kool-Aid.
Right.
It's all orange.
It's all orange now. Yeah.
And so then if you want to try to claim some of that separate, you've got to hire a forensic accountant to go through every single transaction in that account. And that ain't cheap.
No.
And so it becomes very, very expensive. So the number one piece of advice I have for somebody, especially who marries later in life or is in their second marriage, is meet with an attorney or talk to your divorce attorney after the divorce. How do I keep my property just red Kool-Aid?
Yeah, just red Kool-Aid. I like
orange.
that. That's a good image right there.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, having a side, and this may be out of the scope of your expertise, but I was talking to a young couple yesterday, and I said I'm going to be talking to this attorney tomorrow on my show, and I'll pick his brain real quick. They're buying a house together. They're not married. I don't even think they're like common law. We want to talk about that too.
Yeah.
And he's got quite a bit of money, and she has nothing to speak of. So he's essentially buying the home for them. Is there anything he can do to protect himself if they don't make it?
Sure. I mean, so that's no different, Mark, than if 3 siblings inherit a house from their parents. If the parents don't leave a will, or if their will only says all 3 of them share the house, they're now tenants in common, as you're probably familiar with.
Yeah, sure.
And that means any one of them could live in the house. It means if I'm living in the house and either one of my brothers wants to send a homeless person to live there with me, they can.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got those 2 people, they're tenants in common. And so neither of them has superior rights.
Okay.
The smartest thing is to go document what your intent is. Are you intending that? Because if you just put Sally and Bob,
that's it,
on the deed, they're 50% apiece.
That's what I thought.
And so if you want to affect how that's going to be, you can go and do some kind of contractual agreement. Do we intend to be 50-50? If he put in 75%, do we intend to be 50? And what I would suggest a good outcome would be what I gave you an example before with the lady who put in $500,000,
that's
but
right.
it was
that's
a $2 million
That's a good
house.
point.
Preserve that 25%.
Okay.
And that could take just a straight up contract. You can, if they don't intend to marry anytime soon, I do non-marital cohabitation agreements, which just says we live together. We're not married. And unless the Pope himself comes down in the Pope mobile and says the humana humanas, this is my stuff, this is her stuff, and never the two shall create orange Kool-Aid.
Got it. Right.
And so you can do that with co-owned house as well.
Okay. And that kind of speaks to what I want to talk about on community property, because it's an interesting conversation, in my opinion, because, when you take an application to buy a home for people to buy a property, they never ask, it asks, are you married? But it doesn't say, are you community property married? And people don't say, well, we've been together 15 years or something. Well, we're not legally married, but what is that all about? Because I don't understand how to tell people.
So the right term is actually common law marriage.
Common law.
Or under the code, it's called an informal marriage, as opposed to a ceremonial marriage. So ceremonial is what most of us think of when we say married. You either went to the justice of the peace, you went to somebody in Vegas who has a license to do that. You get somebody licensed on the internet who says the humana humanas for you, or you go and have a big church wedding. Yeah. Those are ceremonial marriages.
My last one was on a houseboat in Lake Travis.
There you go. That sounds like a good one.
It was a lot of fun. Sorry you weren't there, man.
And but a common law marriage has 3 elements to prove. And so first, let me just set up why it matters. If two people live together and one of them or both of them are accumulating assets while they're living together,
Mm-hmm.
they run the risk without some kind of planning that when they separate, if they do,
Mm-hmm.
the lesser property one will come in and say, oh no, we were married, common law,
Mm-hmm.
and I want half or more of everything they accumulated during our time together. So
Right.
that's the risk. So what does it
Okay.
take to have a common law marriage? 3 elements. One, you have to live together.
Okay.
That's the only objective finding.
Okay.
The other 2 are subjective. Second, you have to agree to be married. And third, you have to hold yourself.
What do you mean agree to be married?
Hey, honey, will you be my spouse from now on? Yep, I will.
Okay.
Now, what if one of them says they had that conversation and the other one says they
You're
didn't?
right. Exactly.
Whoever the judge believes or the jury believes, that's who wins.
Okay.
The third element is they hold themselves out to be married.
Yeah.
So there has to be some saying to your friends, I want you to meet my husband. I want you to meet my wife. But I've seen a reported case where the only holding out was they went to a hotel and they didn't want to have to explain that they were sharing a room together but not married. So they signed in as Mr. and Mrs. Boom.
That's it?
They held themselves out.
Wow.
I had a personal injury case when I was in Houston where a young man was beaten to death outside of a business, and we were suing that business for being negligent and not providing enough security to cause his death. And when we filed on behalf of his parents and his small child, the mother of that child came forward and said, oh, no. We're married. I have a right to recover too. And her only basis other than her testimony was he had a boat slip that when he went to get it, there were only 2 blanks and they said husband and wife. There were no other choices. And he let her sign that. And she was hanging her hat on that one single document plus her testimony.
Sure.
And so we settled and got her out of the case. But you spend a lot of money fighting over who's the wife sometimes in these probate cases because people can have common law marriage in the state of Texas.
Do you see much of that?
I see maybe 1 a year.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not really common.
No. But what I have a lot of times is people will come in and they'll start telling me this story of being together for years and they got married, let's say hypothetically in 2012, but they've been together since 2007. And these huge number of assets got purchased by the other person between 2007, 2012. Don't you think I'm going to encourage them to try to find facts?
Yeah.
I'm not going to encourage them to lie.
Right.
Is there any holding out? I mean, you put yourselves together on an income tax return.
Oh, forget
joint,
it.
you held yourself out. Right.
Yeah.
But there are lesser, more subtle ways. And oftentimes it's a he said, she said situation as to whether you held yourselves out or not. All you got to do is get 3 girlfriends to come in and say, oh yeah, they talked about each other all the time as husband and wife.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. So let's talk about children. And this is a very sensitive, kind of a sad time sometimes for people getting divorced. It was for me, but believe me. So let's talk about the custody of children and how that plays out, generally speaking.
Sure.
Every situation is different, I'm sure.
Absolutely. And property, really, every situation is a little bit different.
It must be kind of a fun job on some level.
Sometimes it can be very stressful.
Yeah.
And it can be overwhelming to know that so much is riding on the work that you do.
Yeah.
But it's certainly rewarding when it works out the right way.
Absolutely.
And for me, the right way is more often than not figuring it out between the parties.
Yeah. Before going to court.
Absolutely.
Stay out of the court.
What I have a little bit of a reputation of being pretty aggressive with people while they're on the stand. And so
I can see that.
Yeah. So I have a lot of men who will come to me and say, I want you to tear her limb from limb. And I say, listen, I may find that appropriate, but let me ask you if you've thought through what that looks like for the next 20, 30 years of your life with your children.
Yeah. If
you and their mother can't be in the same room anymore because you've been so difficult throughout the divorce, when it comes time for your child to graduate from high school and have a graduation party, and they can't have both of you in the same place, who gets invited?
You're not coming. Right.
When they get married, who's going to miss that?
Right.
When they have the first baby, your grandchild, who's going to miss that? That first birthday cake, when you let the baby smear it all over their own face,
you're not there.
You're going to miss all those things. And so today I want to encourage you to consider whether what you feel today, probably out of anger, is worth that price tag.
That's right. Think long term,
Absolutely.
as they say.
So custody is a lay
Hey,
term.
before we
No.
go, let's make sure they know how to get a hold of you.
Absolutely.
Time is flying by. I figured it would, but
absolutely. So again, my office is at Cuernavaca and Bee Cave. My website is theaustinlawyer.com. That website was actually available in 2010.
I love it.
When I went to get it. And my phone number is 512-328-3030.
All right.
My staff can take care of you anytime during the day. And I'll even get phone messages if something emergent happens at night. I'll get an email telling me that that's come through.
All right. Well, good. Let's
so
get
going
back
to custody. Yeah. So custody is more of a lay term. What the law calls it is conservatorship.
Okay.
And conservatorship means something a little bit different than what people think it means. It really has to do with who gets to make decisions for the kids going forward. In California, as I understand it, they call that legal custody. And then who gets to have possession of the children, which we call possession, they call something else custody. I can't remember what it is, but they have legal custody. I think it's physical custody.
Okay.
So legal custody in California, Texas, conservatorship is who's going to make the decisions for the children. If they have a cold, either parent that has them can take them to the doctor.
Right.
If it's an emergency, whatever parent has them takes them to the doctor. But if they need an invasive procedure to remove a wisdom tooth, to have a birthmark removed off a cheek, something that's invasive, surgical, the parents have to confer on that, and somebody's got to have the decision making. And so in Texas, the family code tells the legislature's told us through the family code that the courts are to name parents joint managing conservators unless there's a good reason not to. And generally what that means is they're going to share that decision-making authority like most couples do during the marriage. That can take several forms. The one that I use the most is we each have the right, subject to the agreement of the other party. If we know certain things like vaccinations have historically been, we've had very different opinions on that. We build in tiebreakers from the very beginning so that you don't have to come back to court when the issues come up. You know those issues are going to happen. Sometimes you differ on education.
What's an example? Could you give us an example?
Yeah, sure. So I was working on a decree yesterday, which is not finished, but we knew vaccination was going to be an issue, and whether or not
for little kids, for the little babies,
for all kids, all the way up through their teen years. Because you've got a wide range of opinions about whether or not preventative vaccination should be done, or things like COVID should be done. And so MPV is another one that's a pretty controversial between some parents. And so we just address those right up front. So with both of the children, a female and a male child, we provided that if they couldn't agree, they would go to that child's pediatrician, and we specifically named each child's pediatrician they were currently seeing would be the tiebreaker. Then, because each parent can take the child to whatever doctor they want to for a non-emergency, I made sure to add in language that those were the only two doctors that could break the tie unless they had a mutually agreed new pediatrician, so that my guy wouldn't get stuck with her going and finding a doctor to do what she wanted.
Just fascinating.
So it's a lot like playing chess.
Yeah,
you have to kind of think a couple of moves ahead.
I think way ahead.
But you want to set them up to try to take care of everything in that decree that can possibly be foreseen, so they don't have to pay for an attorney years down the road when something that we knew was going to happen, an issue with vaccinations. I mean, if you've got somebody who, for religious reasons, Seventh-day Adventists, for example, or Jehovah's Witness, won't do the vaccinations or won't do blood transfusions,
or something, whatever their thing is.
Go ahead and try to figure that out. Now, we know that's going to be an issue. Let's make that part of it. But the primary thing that people fight over with custody is there's a provision that says one parent will be named the parent with the exclusive right to establish the primary residence of the children. So from that verbiage has come the right thing. I'm the primary parent. And up until about 10 years ago, the family code said one parent or the other had to be named primary. They amended that about 10 years ago. Now, under certain circumstances, we don't have to name somebody primary. So more and more, we're not doing that so that one person doesn't feel less than the other parent, especially fathers. Is kind of where it comes out. But that's what we're trying to do, is get them set up to continue sharing parenting responsibilities and to be able to effectively co-parent after divorce.
Is there an age where a child, let's say they're 14 or 15, says, "Hey, I want to go live with my dad"?
They never get to decide. That's kind of a misconception.
That's why I wasn't sure.
There's not an age they get to decide. There are ages that they get to be heard. And so generally what the judges will do if somebody asks for it in the hearing, or the judge can on their own motion or on their own initiative, say, I want to talk to these kids, they can bring them back into their chambers. Technically, the rules provide that that'll be court reported. I get to be present, but no judge will permit that. You're going to go back there and they're going to talk to that child. They're going to gather what information they think is important that guide their decision. They will not tell you what the child said generally. But they factor it into their
So the judge makes a decision.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, as I figured, this was way too fast. We've got like a minute left, you know, and I'm thinking I wish it was an hour show, but we're about done. Give us some last tips about thinking forward about divorce.
There are a lot of people who approach a divorce like the Wizard of Oz. It's good versus evil. Somebody has to win and somebody has to lose. But what Wicked, the musical and the movie, tells us is it can look evil, good and bad, but there can be gradations of that. And what looks like enemies can be made to be friends. The vestiges of friendship can be preserved. And to me, a good divorce is one where the people have sat down and figured out, what can I give up? So that we can resolve this amicably. So we can continue to co-parent this and be good friends after the divorce. That's a good divorce.
That's a beautiful thing. I'm sure it doesn't happen too often, but maybe it does.
I've actually helped maybe 5 to 10 couples stay together by helping them find the resources.
That's wonderful. So you almost
together.
Stay therapist too.
Absolutely.
You know, so. Well, unfortunately, Brother Greg, we are out of time, but I've sure enjoyed it. I've learned a lot today.
Appreciate it.
And we'll have to do it again sometime.
Thank you.
There's more to cover than we've covered today.
Thank you for taking it easy on my first time.